Nothing says happy marriage like your wife inviting her coworker to dinner and you being the only one not in on the joke. I'm Jamie Parrish, and I've been watching my perfect suburban life unravel one smirk at a time. The dining room was set like a stage. Beth had spent 3 hours preparing what she called just a casual dinner with friends. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier light, and the good china, wedding gifts from her wealthy parents, gleamed like armor. Our daughters, Beau and Bree, sat rigid in their chairs, sensing the tension that hung thick as smoke. "Kyle should be here any minute," Beth announced, smoothing her black dress. She'd bought it yesterday. I knew because I saw the credit card charge. $200 for a casual dinner. "Kyle from your office?" I asked, cutting into my steak with surgical precision. "Yes, you'll love him. He's so funny." Beth's laugh had that artificial ring, like a cracked bell trying to sound whole. The doorbell rang and Beth practically levitated from her chair. "I'll get it." Kyle Martinez walked into my dining room like he owned it. Tall, lean, with the kind of easy confidence that comes from never facing real consequences. Designer jeans, expensive watch, teeth too perfect to be natural. "You must be Jamie," he said, extending a hand that had probably never held anything heavier than a golf club. "Beth's told me so much about you." I shook his hand, noting the soft palm and manicured nails. "All good things, I hope." "Oh, definitely." His smile was practiced, rehearsed. "She says you're in electrical work?" "I own Parrish Electrical with my brother John. We wire the buildings that guys like you work in." Kyle's smile flickered. "That's honest work." Beth rushed between us like a referee. "Kyle just got promoted to regional manager at Henderson Financial. He's been such a help with the quarterly reports." "Quarterly reports," I repeated. "At 9 p.m. on weeknights?" The table went quiet. Beau, my 15-year-old, stared at her plate. Bree, 13 and sharp as a razor, watched the adults with the intensity of a scientist studying lab rats. "Sometimes the work runs late," Kyle said smoothly. "You know how it is." "Actually, I don't. I'm usually home by 6. Beth's laugh came out strangled. "Jamie works with his hands. It's different from corporate culture." "Right," Kyle nodded sagely. "Physical labor versus intellectual challenges." I set down my fork with deliberate care. "Tell me about these intellectual challenges, Kyle. What exactly do you and my wife work on so late at night?" "Dad," Beau whispered, but I was past caring about family diplomacy. Kyle leaned back in his chair, my chair, at my table, eating my food. "Well, Beth's been instrumental in developing our new client acquisition strategies. She has this amazing ability to connect with people. I bet she does." The front door opened, and my brother John's voice boomed through the house. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was homicide." John Parrish entered like a conquering hero, all 6'2" of him filling the doorway. Where I was average height and build, John was the golden child. Broad shoulders, perfect smile, the kind of presence that made people step aside without thinking. "John," Beth's face lit up like Christmas morning. "You remember Kyle from the company picnic?" They shook hands like old friends, and something cold settled in my stomach. John had never mentioned meeting Kyle before. "Great to see you again, man," John said, taking the empty chair next to Beth. Too close to Beth. "How's the financial world treating you?" "Can't complain. Beth makes the office a much more interesting place." "I'm sure she does." John's grin was wolfish. "My sister-in-law has many talents." I watched this performance with growing fascination. The timing, the familiarity, the way Beth glowed under their attention, it was choreographed, practiced. "You know what?" Beth said suddenly. "I think we're making my husband jealous." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Kyle chuckled. John grinned. My daughters looked mortified. I stood up slowly, folding my napkin with mechanical precision. "Jealous? No, Beth, I'm not jealous." "Then what?" "I'm educated." I walked out of my own dining room, leaving them with their perfect smiles and hollow laughter. In the kitchen, I pulled out my phone and started making notes. Names, dates, credit card charges, late nights at the office. Sometimes the best punchline is just getting up and walking out. But the real joke? They had no idea what was coming next. Monday morning found me in my office at Parrish Electrical, surrounded by 20 years of honest work. Invoices, blueprints, safety certifications, the paper trail of a legitimate business built from nothing. Unlike some people, I'd earned everything I had. Carl Robertson knocked and entered without waiting for permission. My right-hand man for 15 years, Carl was the kind of guy who could wire a skyscraper blindfolded and still have time to point out what everyone else did wrong. "Boss, you look like heck," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Thanks for the pep talk. Beth kick you out of your own bedroom again?" Carl was the only person who could get away with that kind of comment. He'd been there through the early days when Beth and I were actually happy, and he'd watched the slow decline with the patience of a man who'd seen it all before. Something like that. I pulled up our job scheduling system on the computer. "Carl, I need you to run some reports for me. Client locations, work schedules, employee access logs." "What kind of reports?" "The kind that show who's been using company vehicles for personal business." Carl's weathered face creased into a knowing smile. "Ah, that kind of audit." Parrish Electrical had contracts all over the city. We wired office buildings, shopping centers, residential developments, including Henderson Financial, where my dear wife worked. Where she worked late, very late, with Kyle. The computer screen filled with data. Vehicle GPS logs, keycard accesses records, fuel receipts. Modern technology made it almost too easy to track someone's movements, especially when they were using company resources to do it. "Well, I'll be surprised," Carl muttered, pointing at the screen. "Look at that pattern." Every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 3 months, one of our service trucks had been parked at Henderson Financial from 7 p.m. to midnight. The driver? My brother John, who'd claimed those were emergency service calls. "Emergency service calls that lasted 5 hours," I said. "Must have been some complicated wiring problems." "Real complicated." Carl scrolled through more data. "And look here, Beth's key card shows her leaving the building at 11:45 p.m. those same nights. Funny how that works out." I printed everything. Paper trails don't lie, unlike people. That evening I drove to Murphy's Tavern, a blue-collar bar where Beth's crowd wouldn't be caught seen. But her friend Lisa worked nearby, and she often stopped in after her shift at the hospital. Lisa Chen was a good woman, hardworking, honest, the kind of person who told you the truth even when it hurt. She was also Beth's former best friend, emphasis on former. "Jamie Parrish," she said, sliding onto the bar stool next to mine. "Didn't expect to see you here. Rough day. Thought I'd try somewhere new. How's Beth?" That's actually what I wanted to talk about. I signaled the bartender for another round. "Lisa, you and Beth used to be close. What happened?" Lisa's expression hardened. "You really want to know?" "I really want to know. She changed, Jamie. Started acting like she was too good for her old friends. Then she began making comments about my job, my apartment, my car. Little digs, like she was embarrassed to be seen with me." "When did this start?" "About 6 months ago. Right around the time she got that promotion at Henderson Financial." Lisa took a long drink. "She started hanging out with a different crowd. Expensive restaurants, country club events, people with money." "People like Kyle Martinez?" Lisa's laugh was bitter. "Oh, you know about Kyle." "Yeah, he's part of her new social circle, along with your brother." My hand tightened around my beer bottle. "John? They've been quite the threesome around town. Fancy dinners, weekend trips to the lake house, charity galas. Beth posts about it constantly on social media when she thinks you're not looking." I'd stopped following Beth's social media months ago. The constant humble bragging and fake positivity made my teeth ache. But apparently, I'd missed the real show. "Lisa, would you be willing to tell me more about these trips? Maybe over dinner tomorrow night?" "Sure, Jamie. You deserve to know the truth." The next evening, Lisa met me at Rosario's, an upscale Italian place downtown. I'd chosen it carefully, visible, respectable, the kind of place where Beth's new friends might see us. "This is nice," Lisa said, looking around at the white tablecloths and soft lighting. "Very romantic." "That's the idea." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Jamie Parrish, are you using me to make your wife jealous? Would that bother you?" "Heck no. After the way she treated me, I'd be happy to return the favor." We ordered wine and settled in for what I privately called intelligence gathering. Lisa had 3 glasses of Chianti and a desire for revenge, the perfect combination for loose lips. "The lake house trip started in March," she said. "Beth told everyone you were too busy with work to join them, said you didn't appreciate the finer things in life. Generous of her. Kyle has this boat, apparently, some kind of yacht. Beth kept posting pictures of herself in designer swimwear, champagne glasses, sunset cruises, living the high life, with my brother and her coworker. Your brother's married too, isn't he?" "Separated. His wife moved back to California last year." I'd never asked John why Sarah left. Now I was starting to wonder. Lisa leaned forward conspiratorially. Jamie, there's something else. Beth's been telling people that you two are having problems, that you're controlling, possessive. The wine turned to acid in my mouth. Controlling how? She says you monitor her spending, question her friendships, don't trust her to make her own decisions. She's been painting herself as the victim of a controlling marriage. I sat back in my chair, processing this information. Beth wasn't just cheating. She was building a narrative, setting up her exit strategy with public sympathy already on her side. Lisa, I need to ask you a favor. Name it. I'm planning a little dinner party this weekend. Nothing fancy, just family and a few friends. Would you be willing to attend as my guest? Lisa's smile was sharp as broken glass. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Saturday evening arrived with all the subtlety of a thunderstorm. I'd spent the week making preparations, and now everything was in place. The dining room was set for 12, the good china gleaming under the chandelier light. Beth had assumed I was planning some kind of reconciliation dinner. She was half right. Jamie, this is lovely, Beth said, adjusting a flower arrangement. She wore the same black dress from the previous weekend, but tonight it looked different on her. Desperate, maybe. Who all is coming? Family, mostly. Your parents, John, my sister Connie, a few friends. Kyle? Of course. Wouldn't want to leave out your coworker. The first guests arrived at 7. Beth's parents, Richard and Margaret Ashford, swept in like visiting royalty. Richard was old money personified, silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of man who'd never worked with his hands in his life. Margaret was his perfect complement, all grace and barely concealed condescension. James, Richard said, shaking my hand with the enthusiasm of a man greeting his plumber. Thank you for having us. Wouldn't dream of celebrating without family. Celebrating? Margaret asked. What's the occasion? Truth, I said simply. We're celebrating truth. My sister Connie arrived next, her lawyer's instincts already on high alert. She'd helped me with some paperwork during the week, and she knew something was coming. You look like a man with a plan, she whispered as she hugged me. The best kind of plan, the kind where everyone gets exactly what they deserve. John showed up fashionably late, as always. He embraced Beth with the familiarity of an old friend, his hands lingering just a moment too long on her waist. Margaret Ashford noticed and frowned. Jonathan, how lovely to see you again, she said coolly. Always a pleasure, Mrs. Ashford. John's charm was automatic, practiced. You look beautiful as always. Kyle arrived last, carrying flowers for Beth and a bottle of expensive wine. He'd dressed carefully, designer blazer, silk shirt, shoes that cost more than most people made in a week. Jamie, thanks for including me, he said, offering his soft hand. This is quite a gathering. Oh, we're just getting started. Dinner conversation flowed like poisoned honey. Beth was animated, laughing at Kyle's jokes, touching John's arm when she made a point. She was performing, showing off for her parents, proving how desirable and sophisticated she'd become. Kyle was just telling me about his promotion, Beth said as the main course was served. Regional manager at only 32. Isn't that impressive? Very, Richard agreed. What's your background, young man? Kyle straightened in his chair. Well, sir, I started in customer service after college, worked my way up through sales, spent some time in marketing. Which college? Margaret asked. State University, Business Administration. The Ashfords exchanged a look. State University wasn't Harvard or Yale. It barely qualified as education in their world. And your family? Richard continued the interrogation. What line of work? Kyle's confidence flickered. My father's in construction. My mother works retail. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Beth jumped in quickly, trying to salvage the moment. Kyle's worked so hard to build his career. He's really made something of himself. I'm sure he has, Margaret said with the kind of smile that could freeze blood. I stood up, raising my wine glass. Actually, I'd like to propose a toast to Kyle Martinez, Beth's coworker, John's new friend, and a man who's certainly made an impression on our family. Everyone raised their glasses uncertainly. Kyle, I have to ask, do the Ashfords look familiar to you? Kyle blinked, confused. What do you mean? Well, you dated their daughter for 2 years, lived in their pool house for 6 months, stole jewelry from Margaret's bedroom to buy pills. I thought you might remember. The wine glass slipped from Kyle's hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. Beth went white as the tablecloth. Richard Ashford's face turned purple with rage. You? Margaret whispered. pointing at Kyle like she'd seen a ghost. You're that boy, the troubled one, the thief. Now wait a minute. Kyle started to stand. Sit down, Richard's voice could have cut steel. Margaret, call the police. Dad, no! Beth grabbed her father's arm. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Richard's cold eyes fixed on his daughter. You brought this criminal into your home, around our granddaughters. Have you lost your mind? Kyle bolted for the door, but John was faster, blocking his path. For a moment, I thought my brother was going to help the situation. Then John stepped aside and let Kyle run. Get out of my house, Richard told Beth. Get out and don't come back. Daddy, please. You made your choice, Elizabeth. You chose this garbage over your family, over your children. You're no daughter of mine. Margaret was crying. Her perfect composure finally cracked. How could you do this to us? To yourself? Beth looked around the table desperately, seeking an ally. John studied his wine glass. Connie watched with professional detachment. I smiled and raised my glass again. To family, I said, and to knowing who your real friends are. Beth ran from the room, her heels clicking on the marble foyer. The front door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. Richard Ashford turned to me with something like respect in his eyes. James, I owe you an apology. We had no idea what kind of man she'd been associating with. No apology necessary, Richard. We all want what's best for the girls. Yes, Margaret said, wiping her eyes with a linen napkin. The girls. They can't be exposed to this kind of influence. Connie leaned forward. Actually, I have some papers for you to sign, Jamie. Temporary custody arrangements, restraining orders, financial protections, just in case. John finally looked up from his wine. Don't you think this is a little extreme, brother? Extreme? I turned to face him fully. John, you've been using company vehicles to meet my wife at her office. Company gas, company insurance, company time. For personal business. John's face went slack. How did you... GPS tracking, fuel receipts, security cameras. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? The room went silent, except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. I'll be filing for divorce on Monday, I announced calmly. Grounds include adultery, abandonment of parental duties, and association with known criminals. Connie's already prepared the paperwork. Jamie, John started to speak. Don't. I held up a hand. Just don't. You're my brother and I love you, but what you've done is unforgivable. Beth made her choice, and apparently so did you. I looked around the table at the stunned faces of my family and former in-laws. Dessert, anyone? The parish electrical warehouse sat on the edge of the industrial district like a fortress of honest work. 20,000 square feet of organized chaos. Wire spools, electrical panels, conduit, and tools that had built half the city. It was here, surrounded by the fruits of legitimate labor, that I chose to confront my brother. Ron's truck pulled into the parking lot at 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes late. Even in betrayal, he couldn't be punctual. I watched from the office window as he climbed out of his custom F-250, all chrome and attitude. The truck had cost more than most people's annual salary, financed through the company, at terms that would make a loan shark blush. Jamie? His voice echoed in the cavernous space as he entered through the side door. You here, brother? I stepped out of the shadows near the wire rack, my footsteps deliberate on the concrete floor. Right here, John. He looked older in the harsh fluorescent light, tired. The Golden Boy facade was cracking, showing the weakness underneath. Look, about dinner the other night. About Beth, you mean? John ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I remembered from childhood. It's not what you think. Really? What is it then? It's complicated. I laughed, the sound bouncing off the metal rafters. Complicated. That's what people say when they know they're wrong but don't want to admit it. Jamie, you don't understand the situation. I understand perfectly. I pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. Company vehicle logs showing your truck at Henderson Financial every Tuesday and Thursday. Fuel receipts charged to Parish Electrical for personal trips. Security footage from the parking garage showing you and my wife in what I can only describe as compromising positions. John's face went white. You've been spying on us? Spying? No, John. I've been doing my job. Managing the company, tracking expenses, making sure our employees aren't stealing from us. I stepped closer. Turns out one of them was. I never stole anything. Company time, company resources, company trust. What would you call it? John's jaw tightened. and I saw a flash of the temper that had gotten him in trouble as a kid. You always were jealous of me, weren't you, Jamie? Always the little brother, never quite good enough. Jealous? I shook my head. John, I built this company while you were playing golf and chasing women. I earned my place here. You inherited yours. Bees, we're equal partners. Not anymore. I pulled out another set of documents. Effective Monday morning, I'm calling for a vote of no confidence. Mom still holds 40% of the company shares, and she's already agreed to support me. Connie holds 10% through the family trust. That's 51%, John. Majority control. John stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Mom would never. I showed her the evidence. The financial irregularities, the misuse of company property, the affair with your brother's wife. She was disappointed. You son of a witch. John took a step forward, his hands clenched into fists. He was bigger than me, stronger, used to intimidating people with his physical presence. But I'd been preparing for this moment. I wouldn't if I were you, I said calmly. Yeah, why not? I smiled and pressed a button on the remote control in my pocket. The industrial electromagnet suspended from the ceiling crane hummed to life, its magnetic field reaching out like an invisible hand. John's truck parked directly underneath began to shudder. The electronic systems went haywire. Lights flashing, horn blaring, radio cycling through stations at maximum volume. The custom chrome bumper, loaded with metal, pulled upward with a grinding screech. What the heck? Electromagnetic pulse generator, I explained conversationally, when we use it for testing electrical systems. Funny thing about modern vehicles, they're basically computers on wheels, very sensitive to magnetic interference. John ran toward his truck, but it was too late. The electrical system was fried, the engine dead, the dashboard looking like a Christmas tree having a seizure. You bastard! That truck cost me $60,000. Company money? I reminded him, which means it's technically my truck now. John spun around, rage contorting his features. I'll end you for this. No, you won't, because that would require courage, and you've never had any. You're a coward, John. You steal other men's wives because you can't build a relationship of your own. You live off the company I built because you can't create anything yourself. You're pathetic. He charged at me then, all 200 pounds of frustrated masculinity. But I was ready. I stepped aside at the last second, and John crashed into the wire rack behind me. Spools of 12-gauge copper went rolling across the floor like giant coins. John scrambled to his feet, electrical wire tangled around his legs, his expensive suit torn and dirty. This isn't over, he snarled. Yes, it is. John limped toward the exit, dragging copper wire behind him like a defeated gladiator. At the door, he turned back. Beth loves me, you know. Not you, me. John, I called after him. Beth doesn't love anyone but herself. When you figure that out, don't come crying to me. He left without another word, abandoning his dead truck in the parking lot like a monument to his poor judgment. I stood alone in the warehouse, surrounded by the tools and materials of honest work, and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Check your email. A friend. The attached photos made everything clear. John and Beth at expensive restaurants, John and Beth at the lake house, John and Beth meeting with Kyle Martinez at a downtown hotel. But the last photo was the revelation. John handing Kyle an envelope thick with cash, while Beth watched from across the street. Kyle hadn't seduced my wife. He'd been hired to do it. The betrayal was deeper than I'd imagined, and my revenge was just getting started. The Riverside Country Club's annual charity auction was the kind of event where the city's elite gathered to congratulate themselves on their generosity while writing off donations on their taxes. Crystal chandeliers, designer gowns, men in tuxedos who'd never worked an honest day in their lives. Perfect hunting ground. I'd bought a table for 10, ostensibly to support the children's hospital. In reality, I was there to watch my enemies destroy themselves in public. Beth sat 3 tables away, radiant in a red dress that cost more than most people's rent. She'd somehow convinced the Hendersons, Kyle's bosses, to include her in their party. John was notably absent, probably still trying to explain to his insurance company why his truck's electrical system had spontaneously combusted. Kyle worked the room like a politician, shaking hands, laughing at unfunny jokes, playing the part of the successful young executive. He had no idea he was about to become the evening's entertainment. Ladies and gentlemen, the auctioneer announced, Our next item is a weekend getaway package to the exclusive Mountain View Resort, donated by Henderson Financial. Kyle stood up to acknowledge the applause, basking in the attention. This was his moment to shine in front of the city's power brokers. I pulled out my phone and opened the audio file I'd prepared. Kyle's voice crystal clear thanks to the recording I'd made at the seedy motel where I'd tracked him down 3 days earlier. Yeah, John paid me to seduce her. $50,000 to break up their marriage so he could take over the company. Beth never knew. She thought it was real. Stupid witch actually fell for it. The recording was incriminating, but it needed the right stage. I waited. Do I hear 5,000 for this wonderful mountain retreat? The auctioneer called out. 10,000! Beth's voice rang out across the ballroom. Perfect. I stood up, my phone connected to the country club's sound system through a device Carl had installed earlier. Before we continue with the bidding, I think everyone should know exactly who they're doing business with. The room fell silent as Kyle's recorded voice filled the space, every word echoing off the crystal chandeliers and marble walls. $50,000 to break up their marriage. Beth never knew. Stupid witch actually fell for it. Beth's face went from radiant to horrified in the span of 5 seconds. Kyle looked like he'd been struck by lightning. The Henderson table erupted in shocked whispers. That's not... Kyle started to speak, but the recording continued. John said she was easy. Lonely housewife, married to a blue-collar guy who didn't appreciate her. All I had to do was make her feel special. Tell her she deserved better. Women like that are desperate for validation. Mrs. Henderson, the company president's wife, stood up abruptly. Security! But I wasn't finished. I had one more audio file, this one featuring John's voice from a conversation I'd recorded at the warehouse. Beth's just a means to an end. Once I get control of Parish Electrical, I'll dump her faster than yesterday's newspaper. She's not exactly wife material. She cheated on Jamie. She'll cheat on me. The ballroom erupted in chaos. Beth ran toward the exit, tears streaming down her face, her red dress trailing behind her like a wound. Kyle followed, trying to explain, but the damage was done. The Henderson table looked like they'd witnessed a homicide. I sat down calmly and raised my bidding paddle. 15,000 for the mountain retreat. It sounds lovely. The next morning, Kyle Martinez was unemployed. Henderson Financial had terminated him for conduct unbecoming, and word was already spreading through the city's financial district. His career was effectively over. Beth had disappeared entirely, her social media accounts deleted, her phone number changed. Even her parents didn't know where she'd gone. John was facing his own problems. The company board meeting I'd called for Monday had been moved up to Friday, and the evidence I'd compiled painted a picture of systematic fraud and embezzlement. Carl had found irregularities going back 3 years, personal expenses charged to the company, unauthorized bonuses, equipment that had mysteriously vanished from inventory. It's worse than we thought, Carl said, spreading financial documents across my desk. He's been draining the company dry. How much? $250,000, easy, maybe more. I stared at the numbers, feeling a cold fury settle in my chest. John hadn't just betrayed me personally. He'd stolen from the company our father had built, the business that employed 30 families. Carl, I want you to call the police. You sure about that, boss? He's still your brother. No, I said quietly. My brother died the day he decided to destroy my family for money, and the arrest warrant was issued on Thursday. John Parrish, co-owner of Parish Electrical, was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and theft. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly my family's dirty laundry was front-page material. I didn't feel guilty. I felt liberated. Friday's board meeting was a formality. With John in jail awaiting arraignment, the vote of no confidence passed unanimously. I was now the sole owner of Parish Electrical, free to run the company according to my vision. But I wasn't done yet. Beth and John had destroyed my marriage, stolen from my company, and tried to turn my own daughters against me. They'd humiliated me in front of friends and family, painted me as a controlling husband, an incompetent businessman. They were about to learn the difference between revenge and justice. Saturday night, I hosted a party at my house. Not a dinner party this time, a celebration. The guest list included everyone who'd been affected by Beth and John's schemes, employees they'd cheated, friends they'd lied to, family members they'd betrayed. The doorbell rang at 8 p.m. sharp. I opened it to find Beth standing on my porch, looking like a ghost of her former self. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her makeup smeared, her perfect hair hanging in limp strands. Jamie, please, we need to talk. Do we? I know you hate me, but I need to explain. Explain what? That you were manipulated? That you're a victim? I shook my head. Beth, you made choices. Adult choices with adult consequences. I loved him. You loved the idea of him. The money, the status, the excitement. You never loved John any more than you loved me. You love yourself. And that's all you've ever loved. Behind me, I could hear the party in full swing. Laughter, conversation, the sound of people enjoying themselves, my people, my real friends. The girls are better off without you. They're smart kids, Beth. They'll figure out who their mother really is soon enough. I started to close the door, but Beth pushed against it. Jamie, I'm pregnant. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at her face, looking for signs of deception, but saw only desperation. Congratulations. I hope John's excited about becoming a father. It might not be his. Then I suggest you figure that out before the baby's born. DNA tests are very reliable these days. I closed the door and locked it, leaving Beth standing alone on the porch, where she'd once welcomed guests to our home. Through the window, I watched her walk back to her car. A beat-up Honda that was a far cry from the luxury vehicles she'd grown accustomed to. Inside, the party continued. Carl raised a toast to the company's future. Connie announced that the divorce papers had been finalized. My daughters, who'd chosen to live with me, seemed genuinely happy for the first time in months. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt empty. The next morning brought one final surprise. John had made bail and was waiting for me in the parish electrical parking lot, leaning against a rental car, like he owned the place. Hello, brother. John, I thought you were staying at the county hotel. Funny. His smile was bitter, defeated. You got what you wanted, the company, the house, the kids. Hope it was worth it. It wasn't about what I wanted, it was about what you took. I took nothing that wasn't already mine. You took everything that mattered to me. John pushed off from the car, his movements slow and deliberate. You know what the real joke is, Jamie? Beth never loved either of us. She was using me to get back at you and using you to get back at her parents. We were both just marks in her con game. Then why did you do it? Because I could. Because for once in my life, I had something you wanted and couldn't have. John's laugh was hollow. Turns out it wasn't worth having. He got in the rental car and drove away, leaving me standing alone in the parking lot of the company I'd fought so hard to save. That afternoon, I received a call from Margaret Ashford. Beth had been found in a downtown hotel room, unconscious from an apparent overdose. She was alive, but barely. The baby? I asked. There was no baby, James. She lied about that, too. I hung up the phone and sat in my empty house, surrounded by the remnants of a life that no longer existed. I'd won everything and lost everything at the same time. The doorbell rang. I opened it to find Beau and Bree standing on the porch, their overnight bags in hand. We decided to come home early, Beau said simply. How was your weekend with Grandma Connie? Boring, Bree replied. She made us watch old movies and eat vegetables. I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had in weeks. Well, we can't have that. Pizza for dinner? Can we get extra cheese? Beau asked. Extra everything. As my daughters settled back into their home, chattering about school and friends and normal teenage concerns, I realized something important. I hadn't lost everything after all. I'd lost the illusion of a perfect marriage to a woman who'd never loved me. I'd lost a brother who'd never respected me. I'd lost friends who'd never really been friends. But I'd kept what mattered most, my children, my company, my self-respect. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything.